The following true stories sent shockwaves across the globe. The desert sun was setting over Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. To outsiders, it was just another quiet, unremarkable town. But beneath its surface lurked an unimaginable horror, a nightmare of metal walls and shackles, of screams swallowed by soundproofing, of suffering orchestrated by the twisted mind of one man, David Parker Ray. Ray wasn't the kind of killer who hunted in alleys or back streets. He was methodical, patient, a predator who turned his own property into a chamber of unspeakable torment. His torture room, which he coldly referred to as his toy box, was a cargo trailer modified into a prison of pain. Inside, steel walls held racks of whips, chains, and blades. A worn, leather-bound chair sat bolted to the floor, fitted with straps and metal clamps. Shelves lined the walls, each holding an instrument of terror. And there was the recorder, his voice, devoid of emotion, delivering a pre-recorded message to his victims, welcoming them to their new reality. Ray's twisted mind had spent decades crafting the perfect method of capture, torture, and disposal. He targeted young women, often prostitutes or drifters, whom society would not miss. He and his accomplices, his girlfriend Cindy Hendy, his daughter Glenda Jessie Ray, and several other willing participants, would lure victims into their vehicle with false promises of rides or safety. Once inside, they were drugged, bound, and transported to the toy box. When they awoke, they were greeted not by a man, but by a recorded message. A voice devoid of sympathy, describing in detail the horrors they would endure. "Hello there, bitch. You're probably wondering where you are, what's happening to you. Well, I'll tell you. You're mine now, and for the next few days, you're going to be kept here as my personal plaything. You see, I like to break my toys before I throw them away." The toy box wasn't just a room. It was a fully stocked chamber of horrors. There were surgical instruments, electric shock devices, cattle prods, and hand-forged tools designed for the sole purpose of inflicting maximum pain. Ray's cruelty knew no bounds. He meticulously recorded every session, documenting the pain, the suffering, the slow breakdown of each victim. His accomplices would sometimes watch, sometimes participate. And when he grew bored, he disposed of the bodies, scattering them across the New Mexico desert, where scavengers and the elements would erase all evidence of his crimes. Cynthia Vigil's hands were raw, her wrists swollen from the tight handcuffs that had been locked around them for what felt like an eternity. The dim light of the trailer flickered overhead as she sat chained to a filthy mattress, her mind teetering between disbelief and horror. How had she ended up here? One moment, she had been walking outside a convenience store in Albuquerque, and the next, she had been lured into the vehicle of a seemingly harmless couple. Only now did she realize the woman was no rescuer. She was an accomplice. Ray entered the room, his boots clicking against the metal floor. He flicked a switch, and the speakers crackled to life. Cynthia sobbed as she listened. The recording continued, detailing in nauseating clarity what was going to happen. Her body would not be her own. Her screams would be ignored. Her suffering was a form of entertainment. Ray leaned against the wall, watching her reaction with amusement. "I always like to start with a little anticipation," he said with a grin. For 3 days, Cynthia endured unspeakable torment. But on the 4th day, fate gave her a chance. Ray had left the toy box, and his accomplice, Cindy Hendy, had answered a phone call in the other room, leaving behind a set of keys on a table. Seizing the moment, Cynthia lunged forward, using every ounce of strength to kick over the table and grab the keys with her bound hands. With trembling fingers, she unlocked her restraints just as Cindy returned. A struggle ensued. Blood, nails, desperation. Cynthia grabbed a nearby ice pick and drove it into Cindy's neck. The woman screamed, clutching her wound as Cynthia sprinted out of the trailer, naked, covered in bruises, running for her life into the unforgiving desert. She didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The house, the toy box, the horrors. She had to leave them behind. Help came in the form of a passing motorist who took her to the police. What followed was an investigation that uncovered one of the most disturbing serial torture cases in American history. When the authorities raided Ray's property, they found the toy box. Even seasoned detectives were left shaken by what they saw inside. The tools, the chains, the surgical implements. It was a scene straight from hell. But what haunted them most were the tapes. Hours of recordings, meticulously catalogued, featuring the voices of dozens of victims. Women whose fates remained unknown, whose cries echoed through the walls of the toy box, but never reached the outside world. Ray had boasted to an accomplice that he had killed many. The desert was vast. Bodies could be hidden where no one would ever find them. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Ray never fully confessed to murder. But the blood-stained diaries, the recorded screams, and the trophies taken from victims told a different story. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to over 220 years in prison. Yet justice had its own plans. David Parker Ray died of a heart attack in 2002, mere months after his conviction. The bodies of his victims were never found. The toy box was dismantled, its metal frame scrapped, but whispers of its horrors remain. Some believe the desert still holds secrets, that the spirits of those lost wander beneath the sun-baked earth, searching for the justice they never received. Pedro Alonso Lopez was born on October 8, 1948, in Tolima, Colombia, into a world of violence, crime, and desperation. His mother, a sex worker, raised him among 7 other siblings in extreme poverty. From a young age, Lopez displayed disturbing tendencies. His early life was a tapestry of neglect, abuse, and cruelty. Elements that would later shape him into one of history's most prolific serial killers. At the age of 8, Lopez was caught molesting his younger sister. Furious, his mother threw him out onto the streets. This act of abandonment did not reform him, rather it hardened him. He wandered the streets, stealing to survive, until a kind-hearted American family took him in, but Lopez was not to be saved. When he was caught stealing from the house, he fled, never looking back. By age 12, Lopez was lured in by a man who promised him shelter. Instead, he was repeatedly raped and brutalized. This horrifying experience did not create empathy in Lopez. It fueled an anger that would later turn deadly. He would later claim that it was during this time that he first fantasized about seeking revenge, not against his attacker, but against young girls who symbolized purity and innocence. As a teenager, Lopez turned to petty crime, stealing cars and selling them for quick cash. He was eventually arrested and sent to prison, where he was sexually assaulted by fellow inmates. In an act of revenge, he killed 3 of them, displaying a level of calculated brutality that stunned even hardened criminals. After his release in the late 1960s, Lopez fled Colombia and traveled to Peru, where his true horrors would begin. His preferred targets were young, impoverished girls, many of them street children, whom he lured with false promises of gifts or work. Once he had them under his control, he would take them to remote locations, sexually assault them, and strangle them to death. He later confessed to taking pleasure in watching the life drain from their eyes, a level of psychopathy that baffled investigators. For nearly a decade, Lopez moved between Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, leaving a trail of death in his wake. He estimated that he had killed at least 3 girls per week during his most active years. Unlike other serial killers who thrived on notoriety, Lopez remained a ghost, targeting the most vulnerable in society. Young girls from impoverished areas who would not be immediately missed. His method was chillingly systematic. He would gain their trust, take them to a secluded area, and assault them. He described his murders as a triumph, claiming that he believed he was doing the world a favor by taking their innocence away. His complete lack of remorse stunned even the most experienced interrogators when he was finally caught. Lopez's reign of terror came to an end in 1980 when he was caught in Ecuador while attempting to abduct a young girl. Authorities were already on high alert due to the staggering number of missing children in the region. During questioning, Lopez shocked detectives by confessing to the murder of over 300 girls. At first, they thought he was lying, until he led them to mass graves filled with the remains of his victims. Despite the enormity of his crimes, Ecuadorian law at the time had a maximum sentence of 16 years. Lopez was convicted of 110 murders and sentenced to just 14 years in prison due to good behavior. After serving his sentence, Lopez was released in 1994. The world was stunned. A man who had openly admitted to murdering hundreds of children was now free to roam. He was deported to Colombia, where authorities attempted to charge him with additional murders. However, he was declared insane and placed in a psychiatric hospital. Just 3 years later, in 1998, he was declared sane and released on a $50 bail. After that, Lopez disappeared. Rumors swirled about his whereabouts. Some claim he fled to the jungles of Colombia, continuing his killing spree in secret. Others believe he assumed a new identity and integrated into society. The most terrifying possibility? He may still be out there, preying on innocent lives to this day. Pedro Alonso Lopez remains one of the most horrifying figures in criminal history. His ability to evade justice, combined with the sheer number of his victims, makes him a true monster of the Andes. His case serves as a haunting reminder that true evil can sometimes walk free, unnoticed, hidden among the very people we trust. To this day, his whereabouts remain unknown. In the dim glow of history's most twisted criminals, one name stands out for the sheer audacity of her crimes: Nanny Doss, the giggling granny. Unlike the cold, brooding serial killers of lore, Nanny Doss had a different kind of horror attached to her name, one that came with an unsettling, constant giggle. Behind her sweet grandmotherly demeanor lurked a dark secret, a ruthless, calculating killer who left a trail of dead husbands, children, and relatives in her wake. Born Nancy Hazel on November 4th, 1905, in Blue Mountain, Alabama, Nanny's childhood was anything but pleasant. Her father, James Hazel, was a controlling and abusive man who ruled the household with an iron fist. Education was a luxury she barely experienced, as her father forced her and her siblings to work on the family farm. As a child, Nanny suffered a severe head injury when she struck her head on a metal bar during a train ride. She later claimed that this accident caused blackouts, headaches, and mental instability, a possible explanation for the darkness that followed her throughout life. Nanny sought an escape from her strict upbringing in romance magazines. She fantasized about true love and fairy tale endings, but what she found instead were toxic marriages and a growing desire for murder. At 16 years old, Nanny married Charlie Braggs, a co-worker at the linen factory where she worked. Charlie's mother was domineering and controlling, much like Nanny's father. For years, Nanny endured a miserable marriage, giving birth to 4 daughters, while under the constant scrutiny of her overbearing mother-in-law. In 1927, tragedy struck. 2 of Nanny's young daughters mysteriously died from what was believed to be food poisoning. Charlie, suspicious and fearful, took their eldest daughter and fled, leaving Nanny behind with their youngest child. Not long after, Charlie's mother, who had tormented Nanny, suddenly died. Many suspected foul play, but with no proof, the case was closed. Charlie, however, refused to return, escaping with his life. A few years later, Nanny remarried, this time to Robert Harrelson, a hard-drinking womanizer. Their relationship was turbulent, but she stayed with him for 16 years. When she discovered love letters from other women, her rage boiled over. Instead of confronting him, Nanny laced his moonshine with rat poison. Robert died an agonizing death in 1945, leaving Nanny a grieving and wealthy widow, thanks to his life insurance payout. With a growing taste for murder, Nanny moved quickly. Within a year, she married Arlie Lanning, a well-liked man with a reputation for heavy drinking and womanizing. Arlie, however, didn't realize that his days were numbered. After a few years of marriage, Arlie fell gravely ill and died suddenly. Once again, the cause was ruled heart failure, though some suspected poisoning. Nanny played the grieving widow perfectly, even helping neighbors plan his funeral. Suspiciously, soon after Arlie's death, their house burned down, and Nanny conveniently collected the insurance money. With no one left to question her, she moved on to her next victim. In 1952, Nanny met and married Richard Morton. But unlike her past victims, Richard wasn't a drinker. However, he had a wandering eye, and Nanny didn't take betrayal lightly. Before she could deal with Richard, though, her mother, Louisa, moved in with them. Soon after, Louisa mysteriously died, leaving Nanny free to focus on her philandering husband. Just 3 months later, Richard joined Nanny's growing list of dead spouses, his body riddled with poison. Her final husband, Samuel Doss, was different from the others. He was a devout Christian, a kind but strict man who disapproved of romance novels and television. He banned her from reading her beloved love stories, which infuriated her. Nanny poisoned his food, sending him to the hospital with a mysterious stomach illness. He survived, briefly. When he returned home, she prepared a special meal laced with enough arsenic to kill 20 men. Samuel died within hours, but this time Nanny had made a mistake. Samuel's doctor, suspicious of his sudden illness and death, ordered an autopsy. The results revealed lethal levels of arsenic in his system. The police were called, and Nanny was arrested. At first she played the innocent widow, but under pressure she giggled and confessed to murdering her husband's family members and even her own grandson. She seemed to take pleasure in describing how she poisoned her victims, often flirting with officers and joking about her crimes. In 1955, Nanny Doss pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, avoiding the death penalty only because she was a woman. Even behind bars, she kept laughing, earning her the chilling nickname, the Giggling Granny. She showed no remorse for her victims, continuing to flirt and joke until her death in 1965 from leukemia. Nanny Doss's story is a chilling reminder that evil can wear the sweetest smile. Behind her grandmotherly appearance was a remorseless killer who took pleasure in watching her victims suffer. Her reign of terror lasted for decades, and she got away with murdering at least 11 people. Even now, the story of the Giggling Granny sends chills down the spines of those who hear it, because if a sweet old lady can be a cold-blooded killer, who else might be hiding behind a warm smile? Los Angeles, 1984. A city of bright lights and Hollywood dreams. But as the sun dipped beyond the skyline and the city lights flickered on, an invisible darkness took hold. A predator lurked in the shadows, unpredictable, merciless, and evil. The city would soon come to know him by a name that sent shivers down their spines, the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez, a drifter with no permanent home, had begun a spree of terror so random and brutal that law enforcement struggled to find a pattern. Young, old men, women, none were safe. He entered homes in the dead of night, creeping through unlocked windows, bypassing security with an almost supernatural ease. Those inside awoke to their worst nightmare. His attacks were savage and without remorse. Survivors, when there were any, spoke of his piercing, soulless eyes and the foul stench of decay that clung to him. He left behind symbols of his allegiance to Satan, pentagrams drawn on walls and bodies. He whispered, "Hail Satan," before carrying out his heinous acts. He was more than a killer. He was a specter of fear, a living nightmare. The Los Angeles Police Department was overwhelmed. The sheer randomness of the crimes made it nearly impossible to predict his next move. He struck in different neighborhoods, attacking different age groups, using different weapons. At first, detectives struggled to link the attacks together. A brutal assault in Glassell Park, a murder in Monterey Park, another in Arcadia. The only connection? The overwhelming violence. The stolen items, jewelry, electronics, even a single shoe seemed meaningless. The bloodshed, however, was all too real. The fear escalated. Doors that had once remained unlocked were now bolted shut. Families installed additional security measures. Guns were bought. The streets emptied early. The city that never slept now lived in fear of the one who stalked in the night. A break in the case. One of Ramirez's victims survived. Though left gravely injured, she provided a description. A tall, thin man with long, greasy hair and decaying teeth. Another victim recalled something even more crucial. His sneakers, Avia sneakers, an uncommon brand. Detectives knew if they found those shoes, they would find their man. Forensic evidence began to build. Bullets matched across crime scenes. A partial fingerprint was recovered from a stolen car. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. Still, Ramirez continued his rampage, seemingly unstoppable. He craved the fear he instilled. He watched the news, relishing in the terror he had created. On August 24th, 1985, Richard Ramirez made his fatal mistake. He stole a car, unaware that police had linked him to the vehicle. When he returned from a trip to Arizona, his face was now all over the news. His mugshot had been released, and the people of Los Angeles were no longer afraid. They were angry. Ramirez stepped off a Greyhound bus and into a world that knew exactly who he was. The moment he was recognized, the crowd turned on him. He ran through the streets, desperate, but the people were faster. A group of citizens chased him down, beating him until police arrived. The nightmare was over. Ramirez's trial was just as disturbing as his crimes. He showed no remorse, flashing a sinister grin at the cameras. He held up his hand in court, revealing a pentagram drawn on his palm. "Hail Satan," he muttered, as if mocking the justice system. The trial dragged on for years, becoming one of the most expensive in California's history. The evidence was overwhelming. The survivors' testimonies were gut-wrenching. The jury found him guilty on 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. He was sentenced to death. His response? A chilling promise. "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." But death did not come swiftly. He sat on death row for more than 2 decades, still reveling in his infamy. He received love letters from admirers. He gave eerie interviews, his eyes still as empty as they were during his reign of terror. In 2013, Richard Ramirez died of natural causes while awaiting execution. The devil he had worshipped did not save him. The city he had terrorized had long since moved on. The fear, however, lingers in the memories of those who survived. Even today, his name invokes fear. Richard Ramirez was not just a serial killer. He was a symbol of pure, unfiltered evil. He did not kill for money or revenge. He killed for pleasure, for chaos, for the darkness he embraced. The Night Stalker is gone, but the terror he inflicted will never be forgotten. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From an early age, he exhibited troubling behaviors that hinted at the darkness that would later consume him. A quiet and withdrawn child, Dahmer had a fascination with dead animals, often collecting their remains and dissecting them. This morbid curiosity grew into an obsession, but few around him recognized the warning signs. As a teenager, Dahmer struggled with isolation and deep-seated urges he couldn't understand. His parents' tumultuous marriage and eventual divorce only added to his instability. By the time he graduated high school in 1978, he had already committed his first murder. In the summer of 1978, shortly after his parents separated, Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. The two spent time drinking at Dahmer's house, but when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer panicked. He struck Hicks and ultimately ended his life. Realizing what he had done, he dismembered the body and hid the remains. This crime set the stage for the horrors to come. After his first murder, Dahmer attempted to suppress his urges. He enrolled in Ohio State University, but dropped out due to poor performance. In 1979, he joined the U.S. Army, but was discharged 2 years later due to misconduct. His addiction to alcohol and inability to control his impulses made normal life impossible. For several years, Dahmer lived a relatively quiet life, but by 1987, his dark desires resurfaced. He lured a man named Stephen Tuomi to a hotel room, where he claimed to have no memory of the crime that followed. From that point forward, the killings became more frequent and methodical. Between 1987 and 1991, Dahmer lured multiple young men to his apartment under various pretenses. He often promised money, companionship, or photography opportunities. Once inside, he drugged his victims, ensuring they were unable to resist. Dahmer's crimes escalated in brutality as he attempted to create a state of complete submission in his victims. He sought to turn them into what he called zombies, individuals who would remain in a permanent, docile state. His methods were horrifying, and his apartment became a chamber of horrors. Neighbors began noticing strange smells coming from his residence. But Dahmer always had an explanation. Sometimes it was spoiled meat, other times it was plumbing issues. Despite several close calls with law enforcement, he continued his spree uninterrupted. On July 22, 1991, a man named Tracy Edwards managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment. Running through the streets in handcuffs, he flagged down police and led them back to the scene of unthinkable horrors. When officers entered Dahmer's home, they discovered an array of disturbing evidence, photographs, remains, and a collection of items that defied belief. Dahmer was arrested on the spot, and as investigators combed through his apartment, the full extent of his crimes became clear. He had taken the lives of at least 17 men over the course of 13 years. Dahmer's trial began in January 1992. He pleaded guilty but insane, though the jury found him legally sane and responsible for his actions. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. Despite his notoriety, Dahmer expressed remorse for his crimes. He gave interviews in which he admitted his guilt and stated that he deserved his punishment. In prison, he became a target for other inmates. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was killed by a fellow prisoner, ending the life of one of America's most infamous serial killers. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer remains one of the most chilling in criminal history. His crimes shocked the world not only because of their gruesome nature, but because of the terrifying psychology behind them. He was not a man driven by rage or impulse alone. He meticulously planned his acts and hid them in plain sight for years. To this day, the impact of his crimes lingers in Milwaukee and beyond. His story serves as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath an ordinary facade. The victims, whose lives were taken too soon, are remembered, and their names stand as a testament to the horrors that should never be forgotten. These stories serve as a chilling reminder that the most terrifying monsters often hide in plain sight. The friendly neighbor, the supportive co-worker, the devoted partner. Anyone could be masking a dark secret. They provoke crucial conversations about crime, intent, and the unseen dangers lurking beneath everyday interactions. Evil doesn't always reveal itself. Stay alert, trust your intuition, and remember, sometimes the most unexpected places conceal the greatest threats.